All right, James is here. We can start. Thank you. All right, good afternoon. As a quick reminder, our Deputy Secretary General Mina Mohammed will be down here at about 1:30 or so to brief you following the conclusion of the high-level debate for the 78th General Assembly of these United Nations. This morning, the Secretary General addressed the annual event to mark the International Day for the Total Elimination of Nuclear Weapons. He said that on this day, we remind ourselves of a fundamental truth that the only way to prevent the use of nuclear weapons is to eliminate them. The Secretary General called on nuclear weapon states to meet their disarmament obligations and to also to commit to never use nuclear weapons under any circumstances. He reiterated his appeal to reinforce and recommit to the nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation regime and to use dialogue to end the nuclear threat. This morning, the Security Council held a meeting on the situation in Afghanistan. Briefing Council members was the Secretary General's Special Representative for Afghanistan, Rosa Utumbayeva, and she said that it is well known that the United Nations engagement strategy has been significantly undermined by the more than 50 decrees that the Taliban have issued aimed at eliminating women from public life and education. The question, she said, is whether to continue to engage with the de facto authorities despite these policies or to cease engaging because of them. She said that the UN's mission's view is that we must continue to engage and maintain dialogue, adding that dialogue is not recognition and engagement is not acceptance of their policies. On the contrary, she added, dialogue and engagement are how we are attempting to change these policies, noting that the lack of trust on all sides is a serious impediment to building confidence, but the doors to dialogue are still open. Also briefing the Council was Sima Bahous, the UN Women's Executive Director, who pointed out that women in Afghanistan will lead the change they need, and our job is to hear and support them, including by finding spaces for them to meet with the de facto authorities using all the tools in our toolbox to bring them out of the dark. Those remarks were shared with you. Turning to Yemen, I was asked about the clashes that took place yesterday. I can tell you that we condemn the attack that claimed the lives of 2 Bahraini soldiers and injured several others in the southern region of Saudi Arabia. We offer condolences to the Kingdom of Bahrain and wish a speedy recovery to those injured. We are concerned over continued military tensions at the Yemeni border with Saudi Arabia and on several of the front lines in Yemen over the past months that have reportedly led to casualties, including civilian lives. The Special Envoy for Yemen, Hans Grunberg, is in contact with all the parties and has urged them to exercise maximum restraint and to resolve their differences through dialogue. We encourage the parties to engage constructively with the Special Envoy and reiterate his message to the parties on the need for decisive steps towards a sustainable nationwide ceasefire and the resumption of inclusive political process to end the conflict in Yemen. An update from Ukraine, from the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, where the UN and its partners have now reached more than 8.3 million people as of the end of August. 21% of those assisted were children and 60% were women and girls. We and our partners have also launched a winter response plan to help more than 1.3 million people through March 2024. This appeal will require $268 million in funding. Distribution of essential items are already underway, including heaters, blankets, winter clothes, and shelter repair kits. Our colleagues tell us that more than 470 humanitarian organizations, that's more than half, and more than half of them are national organizations, are active in the response in Ukraine as of late August. That's up for 415 in July. Moving to South Sudan, our peacekeeping colleagues are reporting that civilians continue to endure ongoing violence, with 395 civilians killed between April and June this year alone. According to a human rights brief released today by the peacekeeping mission in Sudan, 222 incidents of violence against civilians were documented, including 128 children, 166 abductees, and 29 victims of conflict-related sexual violence. Most of the violent incidents were attributed to community-based militias, with Warrap state being the most impacted state in South Sudan. With elections less than 15 months away, the UN mission urges the government and all stakeholders to prioritize justice, community protection, and the expansion of civic and political space. And just another note that exemplifies the difficult choices that humanitarian agencies have to make when dealing with funding shortages, something we've spoken about quite a bit here. The World Food Programme are telling us that 7 years since the exodus from Myanmar, Rohingya refugees continue to face a crisis on top of crisis. Repeated climate shocks, now diminishing donor funding, are deepening their vulnerabilities. Cuts in donor funding had forced World Food Programme to reduce its life-saving assistance for the entire Rohingya population in Cox's Bazar from a full ration of $12 to $10 in March, and then $8 per person per month in June. With the current cash allowance of the Rohingyas have now less than 9 cents for each meal, considering if you take on 3 meals a day, and are being pushed over the edge. The World Food Programme is urging donors to step up now and support them in restoring full rations and keeping critical humanitarian operations intact until the Rohingya repatriation. The World Food Programme needs another $175 million to provide the Rohingyas with full rations until December 2024. And also to add that the SRSG for Afghanistan will be at the stakeout. We will do our best to ensure that you can attend both the SRSG and the DSG's briefings. Ibtisam, then James.
I have a few questions. First, as you probably noticed on Friday when the Israeli Prime Minister spoke to the General Assembly and showed a map, the map included the occupied Palestinian territory as part of Israel, or didn't separate between the Israeli territory and the occupied Palestinian territory. Do you have any comments on that?
Well, I mean, any speaker of the GA is obviously free to show whatever map they wish. It is not a map that reflects the UN's, the United Nations views.
On also in the occupied Palestinian territory, as you know, there are more than 6 Palestinians or 7 civilian Palestinians who were killed last week by the Israeli forces. Do you have any comments on that? And also any comments on the fact that since last year, more than 1,000 Palestinians were displaced within the occupied Palestinian territory because of violence, because of settler violence?
A couple of things. On your first question, I would refer you to Tor Venesland's statements on those incidents, which he was very clear. And on your second one, I would refer you to a fact sheet put out last Thursday by Lynn Hastings, the humanitarian coordinator in the occupied Palestinian territory, which illustrates the situation, especially of herder communities, which have been forced to evacuate their lands due to settler violence and the prevention of them to be able to access grazing land by Israeli settlers. And it's about, I think, more than 1,100 people from about 28 different herding communities.
Okay, I have, regarding Mr. Winsland's statement, what would it take, Mr. Winsland, to condemn the killing of Palestinian civilians? Because in his statements, he again expressed his deep concern. And on the other issue regarding the settlers' violence, we don't see Mr. Winsland visiting any of these communities who are affected by the violence, settler violence. Why not?
Listen, I can't speak to Mr. Venesland's travels or activities, where he goes, where he doesn't go. I think his reporting to the Security Council on a monthly basis is very clear.
And on
Sorry.
condemning of the killing of Palestinians?
Again, I mean, I think he uses the language he uses. James.
The situation in Nagorno-Karabakh. We have a large movement of people. Apparently, the Armenian government is saying 19,000 people have crossed into their country from the enclave. We had a fuel depot explosion, 20 people killed, hundreds more injured. What's the UN doing about any of this?
Well, I would say first the Secretary General is very concerned about the displacement of people we are seeing to Armenia as a result of the recent events in the region. First of all, it's essential that the rights of the displaced populations be protected and that they receive the humanitarian support and that they are owed, as well as the protection under refugee law. We are at this point not involved in the humanitarian situation. The Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs is, however, on the ground in southern Armenia, as is UNHCR, where a lot of the population are. As to the source of where they're coming from, I know there is a presence of the ICRC. We're also are providing humanitarian assistance in Armenia, including bedding items and a prepositioned number of supplies. UNHCR is in the lead in kind of providing the support.
Do you know how many staff you've got in southern Armenia? And is the UN trying to get resources and people to UN people to Nagorno-Karabakh itself?
We have about, if my memory serves me well, which sometimes it does, we have about 400 staff in each country. And in terms of visiting the various areas, our resident coordinators in both Armenia and Azerbaijan are in touch with the governments in order to try to get access.
Okay. One other completely different question, if I can. The UK's Home Secretary, so their Home Affairs Minister, Suella Braverman, has been giving a speech here in the US today. And she says that the 1951 Refugee Convention is not fit for the modern age. Does the Secretary General share those views?
Look, for the Secretary General, the Refugee Convention is the cornerstone of international refugee protection, remains a life-saving instrument that ensures millions of people that are fleeing conflict and persecution each year can safely access safety and protection at borders.
So the Secretary General believes this is a settled matter. It's not something that can be renegotiated. The UK and others then are fully obliged to if they're signatories, to abide by its terms.
I think member states who sign up to conventions should abide by those conventions. That's clear. And UNHCR, I think today, said clearly that there's a lot of complex issues right now involving the mass movements of refugees, the mass movements of migrants who are all moving for different reasons. But for us, the Refugee Convention remains as relevant today as an instrument of protection as it was when it was first adopted. Pamela, and then we'll go to the back.
Thanks, Steph. The Secretary General is meeting with Amal Clooney and Nadia Murad. Can you talk about what's on the agenda?
I think it's at their request. So as soon as the meeting will happen, we'll give you a bit of a readout. Mr. Bulkati.
Thank you, Stéphane. Today it marks 1 year since the Nord Stream pipeline was blown up. And there are still no results of national investigations held by 3 countries. As you know, the Security Council failed to adopt a resolution that would ask the SG to establish the independent investigation. My question is, whether do you believe that the time has come to get involved to this process?
As a matter of principle, the establishment of an international investigative commission needs to be done through a mandate, through a relevant body of the UN. I would refer you to what Rosemary DiCarlo said in February of this year, which that we're not in a position to confirm or verify the different claims relating to the incident, and that we urge all concerned to show restraint and avoid speculation. Toshi and then Deji.
Thank you, Steph. Chinese media reported that DPRK started accepting the foreigners. And have you heard, as the UN, have you had anything from the DPRK mission regarding this matter?
It's a good, in terms of letting international staff back in, it's a good question. I'll check.
Thanks.
Deji.
On Afghanistan today, during the Security Council meeting, the Chinese delegation, the representative, talked about, again, the frozen assets of the United States, that's $7 billion US. And he mentioned that half of them actually had already generated $128 million interest, which they are discussing using to pay off the operational fee for the fund.
Sorry, say again.
The Chinese representative today in the meeting of the Security Council about Afghanistan, talking about the frozen assets that held by the United States, half of them, they have been transferred to establish a fund, which is called Afghanistan Fund. And after 2 years, not one nickel went back to Afghanistan, yet there's the interest that generated $128 million US interest. And the board of the fund was discussing how to pay off the operational fee by those interests. Do you consider this a robbery, as the Chinese permanent representative said? First, does this money belong to Afghan?
I think
Afghan
we've
people?
had discussions in the past with the U.S. on these funds and how to best use them for the benefit of the Afghan people. But beyond that, I don't have enough knowledge on the intricacy of the operating. But I will check with you before I make any pronouncement.
But do you think that this $7 billion or the $3.5 billion US they belongs to Afghanistan?
I refer to the first answer to your first question. Madame.
Thank you, Steph. My question is also about Afghanistan, and it's basically just a question of a status of or the latest developments regarding UN staff working in Afghanistan, particularly the issue of the Taliban banning Afghan women. And is everyone not working, or are some of them working?
There's some, my understanding is some may be working from home, others coming into to the office. Our concern is obviously to ensure that they continue to have jobs, but also that they are safe. But sounds like a perfect question to ask the SRSG when she comes out. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Stéphane. Pro-regime fighters resume attacks against STF in Deir ez-Zor, as you know, like it happened yesterday. Is there any comments or any update on that?
I mean, we're very concerned about the continued violence we are seeing in that part of Syria, which really makes lives for civilians who've undergone so many years of violence and difficult humanitarian conditions that much more complicated. Okay, that's it for now. We will keep you posted as to what your next event is, whether it's the DSG or the SRSG.